Dana goes on the Flagrant Podcast, and Dana tells a story that Francis Ngannou had put his hands on somebody with the UFC, specifically himself and Hunter Campbell. Now, that story has been around for years. I have heard that story for the first time about 3 years ago. That Francis, while in a negotiation, grabbed somebody with the UFC, and I heard it on very good authority. One of the reasons I struggled to know if it was ever true, I never spoke to you guys about it, is that would generally be, you would be gone right in that moment. Right there in that moment, if you even said the words, I'm going to kick your ass, or if you even said something threatening, you would generally be gone. And to have somebody touch somebody with the UFC, it just never happened. It just never happened. And I've always struggled to believe whether the story was real or not because of the lack of repercussions. I mean, for example, they tried to re-sign Francis. When Francis left, Francis was getting $600,000. And Francis was upset about that. He said, hey, I'm the heavyweight champion of the world. I've got to be paid more money. Now, the UFC is looking at it going, okay, but your contract calls for more money. It calls for much more money. It's just being done through an incentive program known as pay-per-view points. You've got to reach certain thresholds within the pay-per-view to get those bonuses. Now, the whole reason that is done is so that a guy will go out and do media. That a guy is excited, that he's incentivized, that he shows up. He calls into the radio shows. He sits down for the podcast. That's the whole point. So when Francis was not hitting those numbers, you then run into a question of why. Was it an opponent issue and it just wasn't an interesting match? That perhaps would not be Francis's fault. Was there some kind of a glitch within the software of the actual streaming of said pay-per-view? Like these things are all possible and they're within the realm. Or did the UFC ask you to do PR and marketing campaigns and opportunities that you refused to do? And that's how that's going to be looked at. So when Francis was paid $600,000, I can just tell you, when he fought Surreal Gone, and that's really the only one that I have inside actual knowledge and numbers of, but when Francis fought Surreal Gone, that was supposed to be the biggest pay-per-view of all time, or heavyweight. That was supposed to outdo anything that Lesnar had ever done, that Couture had ever done, that Couture versus Lesnar had done. I mean, it was supposed to be, we had the interim champion and the undisputed champion, but moreover, they used to be training partners. So, this thing was red hot. I remember this so well because I remember making the comparison to Ultimate Warrior versus Hulk Hogan. And when this was red hot, it was the story. It wasn't the performance. And fighters will get this wrong till the end of time. They've got it wrong from the beginning of time. They've got it wrong now. In the future, they'll get it wrong. It's marketed as though you're buying a performance, but you're not. What you're paying for is a story. So when you have Francis and Surreal, and you have the fact that they used to be training partners, and you have the fact that Surreal was a professional kickboxer, which Francis wanted to be, Surreal's record was just beautiful. I think it was 15-0, completely undefeated. He had a better record than Francis. He did not have as beautiful of a belt. The undisputed title, of course, trumps the interim championship. But then you even have the former head coach of both athletes who stayed with Surreal and was going to be in the corner of Surreal. Like, this was a really good story. It really was. It should have been the biggest fight in history for the heavyweight class just because the story and the prize were so big, and it didn't go that way. It just didn't go that way, and I can only tell you from my media perspective, but we couldn't get him on. We couldn't get him to come out and to tell that story. And Surreal wasn't much better. I mean, they both did an equal part in screwing up that night. But when he gets a payout of $600,000, and the UFC's looking around and going, hey, for most athletes in your spot, that would have been millions. It just created a very complicated spot. And Francis ultimately left. I did think it was very compelling when Dana told the story, though, that Francis had grabbed somebody within the company and within the negotiation. And that in theory, at least, No matter how hard they tried to keep him, they did still try to keep him. So a little bit of a revelation there. Very interesting story. Glad Flagrant got it out of Dana.